We also do not believe that the time spent on traveling to the bus, on the bus to Bristol at the 5th grade level is time well spent. On each route, the first children picked up spend an hour or more on the bus traveling to Bristol Elementary School. We understand that our students would have a different experience than others who would join the middle school at the 6th grade level, but we are already different and prefer that model to the one currently in place. That is the essence and complete text of the petition. There are 7 pages of signatures for your review with copies available for the record. I would ask if Lauren Moran, who is with us this evening, would care to speak in favor of the request and to whom we might direct any questions. Lauren? Just care to state your name and...
Sure. At the mic?
That'd be best.
Okay. I'm Lauren Moran from Danbury. I developed the petition to reconfigure the Danbury School to a K-6 school, starting with the next school year after speaking with several parents who did not believe that sending the kids to the Bristol Elementary School in 5th grade was a beneficial setup. Most of them feel that there's too much time on the bus, it's too many transitions, and we feel that especially now that some of our classrooms have been combined in Danbury and we have the space for those students to return to our school, we don't see why they shouldn't at this point. And so because we would like to have 5th graders back, we've requested K-6. A lot of parents seem to support a K-6 model, and because we know that we probably don't have high enough numbers to have just a 5th grade classroom, we're asking for a combined 5th and 6th grade classroom.
I understand. I understand that there was an article on the Danbury Town warrant relative to this subject. Could you tell us about that?
I don't know much about the article. Can you?
There was some sort of reference, and I just heard this, but I'm not sure. But there was some sort of reference to the town of Danbury wanting to evaluate a study or commence a study to withdraw from the district.
I have heard about that. Yes. Do you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wondered if you knew anything about it. If it was related to this at all.
I have heard of it. I know that there are some people who support this reconfiguration who also support the study. My understanding is that it's just to, the main purpose of the warrant article, I believe, is to have the board undertake a study so that we can see kind of what our options are as far as possibly just gaining more control of our own school, because we do constantly face a threat of closure. So I think it's going to be looking at, if we have the option of maybe taking the school back, because I believe the district owns it right now. So it would be looking at that, and also looking at, there is some support in Danbury that I know of that people support a K-8. So it would be looking at, if we could take control back of our school, could we expand it to house those children as well? So that's really all I know of it at this point.
Are there any other questions of the board, from the board?
How do you feel about that? Dual classrooms, like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. I don't think that's a good practice.
Of combining classrooms?
With the 2 grades in one room.
Sure. I actually don't have a problem with it. I think it seems to be working pretty well right now with our 3rd and 4th graders. I believe we have 15 students in our combined 3rd and 4th grade classroom. And I think that actually, in a lot of ways, works out to be positive for them, because otherwise you'd be looking at 7 3rd graders in the classroom who aren't, they're probably getting more choices in peer interaction in a larger setting.
I've had bad experiences with the split classrooms. 73 years ago, I was in one,
Oh.
and I never got over it for 4 years.
Oh, no.
I imagine they've made progress since, but it's still,
Yeah, from what
I don't
I've
think it's a good practice on this one.
Yeah, from what I've seen so far in Danbury, it seems to be being handled really well.
Now there's a first grade class and a second grade class.
Yes.
What would happen if the population increased too much for them for them to have combined 5th and 6th grade class?
I have to say I don't know that that is something that would happen in the near future at this point. I know it could happen further on down the line. With the numbers we're looking at, most of our classrooms are running between 8 and 10 kids. I think that because the numbers fluctuate so much between years, like we have 7 third graders, but we have 15 first graders, there's always an option of possibly looking at a reconfiguration and combining, different age groups if it wasn't working to combine that year's groups.
To that
if that
point,
makes sense.
There's information in the packet that we get every month. And what's actually happening, Dawn, throughout the state of New Hampshire is the demographics are showing that there's a 7% average decrease throughout the state. And that has to do with other issues. But the impact on us is that the latest enrollment figure says that we're now down to 1,263 students. So we continue to lose students, not add them. And that has been the trend for the past 7 years. So while your question is legitimate, and the simple answer to it is we'd have to add whatever resources are necessary, the trend is exactly in the opposite direction. We've actually found, and this will come out relative to the K through 8 study, that the district has approximately 60, don't hold me to these numbers, 62 classrooms right now that a K through 8 configuration could otherwise be handled in 45, was it, Sue?
I can't remember, it was 40-something.
40-something.
I think 42.
Yeah, 42 to 45. So we're about a whole school too big right now in terms of numbers of classrooms. With that said, my feeling on this is that whatever the outcome of the K through 8 select committee study is probably something we should wait for before we react to the initiative that's happening in parallel in Danbury. But I note with interest now that it's now a second town that is looking to do a reconfiguration that has approached the school board. Bridgewater Hebron approached us in September, and now Danbury has gone through the effort 3 months later in December, I might add, and the presentation is only coming up in February because of timing. But there's that effort going on, and I think it would be kind of silly of us to do anything until we got the results from that study. Those that signed the petition, are they aware of the K through 8 study, do you know?
I believe that a lot of them are.
They were?
Yes. I know most of the parents who signed it, I believe, are aware of it. We did put it out in a more public place in the local store for citizens, and I don't know how much of the citizenship is really aware of what's going on.
Well, you got 80 signatures on here, which for Danbury is
Right.
fairly
It's great.
substantial,
Yeah.
I think.
I found the actual counts. There's kindergarten's 11, first is 15, second grade's 11, and 3 and 4 is 16.
Okay.
We just changed it there. A couple months ago, we changed classroom
We split a.
First and second.
First and second grade.
They were together.
Yeah, there was an issue related to that, safety issue, and the choice was to split the classrooms into two separate areas.
But there's also 26 in that first and second combination, so.
I think that was the primary
a
issue, class
large.
size.
Yeah.
That's why I was thinking, that there could be a time when a combined fifth and sixth might have to be split as well.
Yeah. Well, Sue, do you have any comments on this? The
Well-
Case Away Committee has looked into the detail across the district, so.
Well, there was another issue too with that class size of 26 because one of the children was in a wheelchair and there had to be a little more room
Right,
to
that was
access. And also,
main
if you say you have a bulge in one or two grades, you're probably not going to have it in all the grades, especially with a declining school population. You could rearrange things if it came to that, I would say. And Ruby left me some comments before she left, and she said one of those was that she supports the K-6 plan for DES.
I don't know. Doing this, you're gonna end up with big bills and big problems. And I think that's why you got Bridgewater's thinking of going on its own. They're talking about going on its own. They're splitting this district up, like I said at the beginning, and that's what's gonna happen. Believe me, what you're gonna do to this district, you're gonna destroy it before you're done. You start changing stuff around, wait a while between.
Well, if we don't change anything, perhaps the district will fall apart as
Why?
well.
Why?
Because you have Bridgewater Hebron, who perhaps would like to have a K-8.
They want independent schools,
Perhaps
what they
could.
want, and that's what they're talking now also. And that's what I'm
But
saying,
what
you're
if?
gonna destroy your district.
Well, I would think that maybe.
Well,
what
when
you
they
wanna
figure out
do
what
is-
it's
Wait a
gonna
minute, one
cost
at a
and
time.
I'm
then
saying what it's gonna cost. and
Paul, one at a time. Sue has the floor.
Maybe what you would want to look towards as a goal is to do the same for everyone, then, and everyone would,
But you can't do it right now at this
Yeah.
time where we're going. The way the buildings are laid out now, you're gonna destroy what you have. Down the road, maybe 10, 12 years, New Hampton's gonna need a school probably. And then you can see at that time what you're gonna do. But you do with the facilities you have now.
I don't understand how you can say that when I just made the point that for the past 7 years, the population trend has been decreasing statewide, not just here in our district.
Yeah.
And that every month I take note of this figure, and that the enrollment has dropped since last month, down to 1,263 students. And if you look at the demographics of what's happening across the state and realize that our population is aging and that there's very little workforce housing, which is the crux of the issue, it causes younger couples with school-age children to leave the area because they can't afford the housing. The flip side of that is that you put more over 55 age housing in place in our geography, and as a result of that, you attract older people. And that's one of the reasons the demographics are changing to becoming an older state, if you will. So for that reason, those of us that are up there in age are more in the majority than the student age workforce. That means that you're going to see a continued trend downward in student population. There's no debating that. Those are the facts.
That's facts. I went through this 30 years ago, and they went the same way. The schools, they closed them down, went down, and they come back now, they're building them all again.
Well, the baby boom is pretty much over now, and the problem that we're facing in New Hampshire has more to do with the demographics of workforce housing. And that continues to be true. We studied this 4 years ago and found out that there are consequences to what's going on in the communities. and it has mostly to do with the aging population and little workforce housing availability. As a result, we are going to find that the student population continues to decrease, and we're at the point now where we have what I just said, 62 to 65 classrooms to handle our K through 8 population right now that is now a K through X school and a middle school. But we only need physically approximately 42 to 45 classrooms to do that. So we're already funding and have facilities that are more by about a third than we need. So the discussion is going to have to come to fruition at some point. Obviously, the parents in Danbury think that there's an issue. The parents in Bridgewater and Hebron did, and that's why we put a study committee together. And this data is floating to the top. So being concerned, as we well should be, about increasing population is true, but the facts belie that. The facts are that the population amongst students is decreasing.
And you're trying to save a building out there in Danbury, where you could close down, put them right here, and cut everything down. And you could get all the facilities here, and you want to move them out of that middle school, which is a nice building, which has got plenty of room in it for the middle school. It's fine, and you're gonna disrupt that whole thing, and it won't work. You don't have any room up in New Hampton. You think this community, or these older people are gonna wanna vote for a brand-new $20 million school out there? I don't think so.
We're not talking about a $20 million new school.
Are you gonna
We're
fit
talking
K through
exactly the opposite.
All right,
Will.
that's mean that you brought up K through 8, so we'll get on the agenda late as it is. You guys brought it, I didn't bring up K through 8. K through 8, out, how are you gonna put it out there in New Hampton?
No one said that we will, and the
Or it's
request
just
is,
gonna be a private place in Bridgewater.
the request for Danbury is K through 6.
Yeah, it's the same thing that Rose had out there, that they're ready to secede from the union, so to speak, and out of the SAU and go on their own. And that's what happened in Bridgewater, they said the same thing. Right? Yes. Bridgewater said it, and Danbury is now saying the same thing.
Saying the same thing to go to K through 8?
No, they're gonna withdraw if they don't get what they want from the SAU.
That's not correct. That is a
They all wanna have
misinterpretation.
independent schools.
That is a misinterpretation of the facts. What was discussed was they came to the school board and asked for consideration to go through K through 8.
Yeah.
And the board, in its wisdom, decided to study the issue, and that's still underway. There are no results, but there is some data. And the data that has floated to the top centers around the facts that say we have 65 classrooms now to house what could otherwise be done in 42 to 45 for K through 8. And our student population continues to reduce. Those are the facts.
And even your data don't, one and one doesn't always make two with those data, because that isn't the way it works. You may have that many classrooms, but you can't utilize them the way you want.
Well, that's why it's being studied by the select committee on K through 8.
Yeah.
And there's a meeting tomorrow evening, which is set in Hampton at the community school, where they're gonna finalize things to come up with a report to present to the school board. I think it's gonna be probably in March, right? At the end of March. So, having followed it rather closely, I'm familiar with the data that's floating to the top. I'm just sharing that with you. Any other comments on the request for the petition?
What's the options for the board to respond?
I think that we really have to wait for the outcome of whatever the K through 8 committee comes up with, because the request is now different than what the K through 8 committee is studying. They may come up with a different recommendation. I don't know. There's really no indication of what
Wasn't the original thing, the K through 8 was gonna be for the whole district, not just Bridgewater?
the K through 8 request was Bridgewater wanted to do it on their own,
Yeah.
much like Danbury's approached us to do K through 6 on their own. And we said, wait a minute, we want to study this for the whole district to see
I
what
said
the
at the
implications
time,
are.
At the meeting, I said,
You
it
did.
should be district-wise,
Right.
but not at all. We're not gonna have independent schools. That's what I said at that meeting, right?
Yes, that's why we're
That's
studying.
why the
it for
committee's
district.
studying.
It should be universal. You gotta do it for one, you gotta do it for all. And now you gotta
Well,
get the
I
money to
don't-
do it for all.
I don't necessarily agree with that thought. Your idea was that we should study it district-wide because we are a district, a cooperative
That's right.
district.
That's right, you can't do it for one, provide Bridgewater with an independent school with 1 through 8, and New Hampton doesn't have it.
Right.
Bristol doesn't have it,
Which is-
Danbury doesn't have it.
Which is why we decided to study it, and that's what's underway. And without those results, I think it's going to be difficult for us to grant the request or even consider it at this point, because that's already underway.
No, I agree on that.
There's pressure coming from the public to deal with this in a different way, as evidenced by this petition. That's all. So, any further discussion?
I agree that we should wait and see.
I thought that
How
would be
this
so-
step comes out
We've got
first.
enough things going on, let's get involved in that. We'll see where that would go.
But certainly
Phil?
to keep that in our minds.
I don't know the implications of this specific request and/or the recommendations and timeline for implementation from the K-8 committee. But I think the board needs to be sensitive to the fact that if there are implications for staffing, if we don't make decisions prior to April 15th, that may have significant impact, with which we'll have to deal. That is, you need to make some if you're going to reduce staff, you need to do that so that we can notify per law. I'm not saying that there will be any, but I'm just saying that as you have these discussions, please enter into them with your eyes open, that there is a timeline that we would need to be sensitive to.
Sure, sure. And the flip side of that is if for whatever reason the K through 8 report comes back and says we need to add staff, then we would have to search for it in time by April 15th as well.
Well, no, you can search anytime, but if you don't, as you know, I think, if you don't notify staff by that date, you're going to employ them for the next year,
Right.
is all, yeah.
I don't think there's any danger in making a change like that quickly. Now, that said, I don't know what the report's gonna come back and say in the
Right,
next
I think
couple
the
months.
Danbury petition is one thing, because it's such small numbers and the class sizes, but not knowing what the K-8 committee and their time, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If it's going to be, combined with something, and they're going to say, we want to do this for the 2013-14 school year, that is the K-8 committee, we have already identified that there is a potential, with an emphasis on potential problem, with certification and high teacher
Yeah.
quality status of middle school teachers moving down to the elementary level.
Yeah, and
That's all I'm saying.
And that's, for example, that is one reason why a decision like that would be delayed another year.
That's correct. That's kind of what I'm alerting you to.
Yeah.
Yes,
I agree.
yeah.
I don't think my question was answered, because they've presented the petition. What's our responsibility and options of responding to it?
We can do whatever we want to, and the discussion at this point has been that, well, we have something similar in the form of a K through 8 study in place. We probably would want to see what the results of that is before we make any kind of action or take any action on this. So I think
Right.
given Phil's comments, one of the reasons that we're far away from this is his input regarding the staffing issue. There's another reason as well, and there's a policy in place that says that we have to do a longer-term study in order to close a school. So if we're going to suspend that policy, that's one thing, but that's another thing that comes into play. So nothing's going to happen overnight here. But while we say that, we need to recognize the reality of the data, and the data says that we're losing population. So, are there other comments on this at this point?
On the time, I'll make a motion, we'll table that until after the K through 8 report.
That's fair. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah. Then we don't have to address it. Let you know that you can't do it at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren.
Thank you.
Appreciate your patience and bearing with us. Got a lot going on. Okay, we're at discussion item 9B now, which is one letter ahead, the recap of the deliberative session that was scheduled for February 2nd and held without issue. Good thing we didn't schedule our snow date on our snow date. Our meeting on our snow date. So, do we have numbers on what the attendance was?
My estimate was about 160 to 170.
Oh, there were that many. I thought we had 120.
That was my early estimate, but we had people flowed in at late.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
160 to 170 attendees. Okay. The session went well. There was no articles amended. And I don't think there were any issues raised from the floor that were a surprise to anyone. So the information on the warrant is as it stands with the recommendations from each committee. Any further comments from any member of the board? Anything you might like to see changed for next year? So we probably have this down to a science. Okay. I would like to make note at this time that we should consider the corresponding date in 2014 for the deliberative session of the first Saturday in February with an equivalent snow date, just as a footnote of the following Saturday. That seems to work for people.
I know the towns that have SB2 aren't happy that we grab both Saturdays. So I don't know.
Well, if we stay efficient, we can have very quick sessions as we did. I think we were out of there by
Right.
noon,
Just
weren't we?
never know.
Yeah, 2 hours.
If you didn't, though,
So-
that would be a real issue for some of the towns.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to deal with everything in our board meetings and to the satisfaction of the electorate. Okay, no further discussion on that. We'll move on to what would now be 9C, which is the personnel and resignation that's been submitted. Dr. Phil?
In your packet is a letter from Ms. Freacott stating her intent to resign. In this case, that means that because she's on a year's leave, that she would not be returning. And as we've experienced, I think it's positive, and I personally appreciate knowing this much in advance because it will help us figure out with respect to our staffing situation, and would encourage the board to accept her resignation.
Okay, without objection, can we apply this to the consent agenda? Any objection, Sue?
Well, I don't have an objection, but I just wanted to read a comment that Ruby had made
Okay.
about this.
Under
And
discussion.
she says that losing Rita is a loss. She says, I observed her class and went on a field trip with her. She's a very positive and caring teacher.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to accept the resignation, and it is part of the consent agenda without objection. Moving on to item 9D,
Thank
the
you.
newfound nutrition online payments. Dan?
We've had various commentary from users of the nutrition, our nutrition sales system, specifically parents, wanting to both A, have visibility into the activity on their students' accounts, and B, rather than sending in a check or cash for their student, being able to fund the students' individual accounts from home with the use of a credit card. The software we use for our point-of-sale systems in all our schools is a product called NutriKids. They have a partner that provides this visibility and this availability of depositing through credit cards. It doesn't, the credit card fees don't hit the school. The users are charged $1.95 every time they add funds to the student's account as a transaction fee. There's no fee associated with them being able to have visibility into the activity of their individual students' accounts. We have, so it's, from our IT standpoint, it's secure, it's an out-of-the-can application. It's handled entirely by our software provider and their partners, and then the data is just transmitted to us, and the funding, obviously.
Is the charge clearly identified to the parents?
Yes. That is how it's reported to me. That they're acknowledging that they're paying a fee in addition to the amount that they're funding the account.
And the way it's done now, they have to provide a check in order for the monies to be deposited with no fee.
They send in cash or check
Yeah.
with their student
Yeah.
to the school. That funding all comes to this building. Deposit slips are made up. The cash and checks are brought to a bank. Our courier is carrying that cash. There's a variety of internal reasons why I think it's appropriate to do this. Security, all that kind of thing.
And are the parents aware of the transaction fee involved to do this?
No, because we haven't rolled it out yet. They would be aware. It'd be an option. It's not, we're not gonna force them to go to this
Right.
method. It would just be another option.
It's an
for them.
option for
Right.
them to have, but in order to use it, they would have to comply with the fee structure
Yes.
associated with the software.
Correct.
So it has advantages administratively for those of us that need to process that information. It also has advantages for the parents that want to take advantage of doing that digitally rather than give the kid a check or cash. And so those are reasons why we should do it. But my question is, would it be effective? Would parents want to use it if they knew they had to pay $2 to pay 20?
I haven't evaluated or studied that scenario.
Yeah.
And I honestly, from my perspective,
Don't care.
don't care. It's their choice. It's one other option. They can take it or leave it. And it's not gonna cost us anything to give them that option.
Parents that pay in cash
Excuse me.
don't
Walter,
have
go
access to the use of the,
At this point, we don't give any parents access to the visit. We can print out a balance. If a parent requests a balance, we can print out a balance and send it home. We frequently get challenged by parents that, oh, my child doesn't buy snacks, they only buy lunch, so why is their balance low? And we print out a balance showing that the child has indeed been buying snacks and charging it to the account. So this would give them that visibility as well.
Yeah.
Sue?
Well, I like the idea that they can have the visibility, and I like that they have a choice. I'm not crazy about the $1.95 fee, but I suppose if they paid monthly, it wouldn't be such a big, a large amount. But I think the visibility is going to be important to a lot of parents, and they can still send in a weekly check if they want to.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I'm so averse to those fees. Just inherent.
Well, I would suggest to you that,
Alabama's new law,
I-
you can charge the fees.
I would suggest to you that if they weren't paying the fee, we'd have to pay a fee associated with taking a credit card. And our food service doesn't have the kind of revenue to support those additional fees.
I understand that.
And once again, we're not forcing them into it. It's just an option that we've gotten the request to make, we have requests from parents for that availability,
To have the option to do it that
to
way,
fund by credit card from their home.
which will cost them the fee.
I have not gone into that level of detail. All I'm reporting to you is that I have had multiple requests from parents to be able to fund the students' accounts from home with a credit card.
And those that do not use the credit card do not get the online access to the usage information.
I don't know that that's accurate. I think once we turn on the online visibility, they'll,
Anybody
they
can
could,
access.
they'll have, just like they have visibility to their students' grades at certain levels.
Because it says here, this would provide the visibility at no cost to anyone,
You take EBT cards.
but the transaction is the cost.
I'll take anything right now, Lloyd.
I take 'em.
I don't know the answer.
Any other comments? Okay, well, I'm real familiar with credit card fees. I don't like them either. As a merchant myself.
Yeah.
Is there objection to moving this onto the consent agenda?
No.
No.
Okay, please add it, Dan. This will be item 9D, also added to the consent agenda. And there's a motion in the packet accordingly. Okay, the next item is 9E, the Lee Ross Memorial Scholarship. Dan?
A scholarship has been set up. The logistics have been put in place for a scholarship to be known as the Marie Ross Memorial Scholarship. This constitutes trust funds. As of today, we have a little over $7,000 that's been sent in for this scholarship. The initial, the family has, family and one of the founding benefactors have come together on language in terms of how the amount to be awarded annually, which is adjusted, which can be changed at the will, there's discretionary, there's a base amount, and it can be changed if the family or the trust, if the family decides to change it. It is in keeping with board policy. It would be a committee of staff here at the high school that would make the award of the annual scholarship. And we're looking for this to legitimize it, if you will, and thereby enable our treasurer to open up an account, a separate account with the public deposit investment pool as it currently exists for our other two substantial scholarships, and deposit these funds that we've been receiving.
Any discussion?
Yes,
Sue?
I'd like to say that I think it's a wonderful thing, and it's so appropriate, because that's the place that Marie would have wanted money to be.
Has there been any advertising or announcements of this fund?
No, the only the only notification, if you will, was the sign that was at the memorial, the celebration of life that we had here, and word of mouth.
Could the board somehow get that information out to the public?
What do you have in mind?
Well, I wrote down a press release, but it's one idea.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I'm sorry, let me just add, that
Putting it
in the obituary, it was noted.
Yeah, I think along the lines of where Dawn's coming from here, we could probably, depending on the result of the vote this evening, put out a press release, as well as add it to the website by way of a,
Yeah.
informative piece of information. The other part goes if it is brought to fruition, which I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. The guidance department deals with the scholarship issues.
That's not accurate. Not internal scholarships. By board policy, it's a committee of the faculty of the high school.
But isn't it coordinated by guidance?
I do not believe that is accurate.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, I stand corrected.
That's not how it was explained to me.
Okay.
Mentioning the website, Marie is still on the website as superintendent.
Where?
On the website, under superintendent. I just saw it today.
Really?
Yep.
You mean if you go to the website and it has stats, like SAU staff?
Right.
It should be, okay.
Well, we'll get right on that.
Yeah, I don't see that, but I'm sure you're,
The SAU staff, and then under that,
That has nothing
there's
to do with us.
superintendent.
What's that?
He was mentioning it, she's still on LinkedIn.
oh, I see. You're under the school administrative unit 4.
Yeah.
There's a section superintendent, and Marie's opening remarks for this school year are there with her picture still.
There it is. We'll change that tomorrow.
Okay, is there any objection to this being part of the consent agenda? Hearing none, please add it. And we'll now drop down to item 9F, which would be surplus, which is also in yellow in your packet. And if there's any questions on this, you can see the detail listed here. I would have you direct those questions to Dan. Hearing no objection, I'd suggest that we add this to the consent agenda as well. Is there any objection to doing so?
No.
Hearing none, what is now item 9F is added to the consent agenda. Okay, we took the next one out of sequence and covered that already, which became 9A. What is now item 9H is the proposed school calendar for next year.
Is it 9G?
It's H
It
now.
was, but it dropped down to H.
Why? F became A. A became B, B became C, C became D, D became E, E became F,
B, C, D, E,
Right.
F.
and G and H stay the same. I'm not trying to be argumentative.
It's true.
You're right, you're right. Yeah, I just did that by force of habit.
It really doesn't matter.
I'm not just numbers, I'm letters too.
Good.
Apparently so. Dr. Phil,
In your,
please address item 9G.
okay, in your packet is a copy of a proposed calendar. I think it's in yellow. I thought I saw it.
I think it is on the back of.
Yeah, on the back of.
Something.
And there's no intent for you to act this evening, but rather just to get it before you, make a few comments, and I have already received input from the building principals. I will also be discussing this with NADA. In the development of this proposed calendar, I did speak with Mr. Halloran, because the intent is obviously to mirror Plymouth High School schedule as much as possible because of our students attending the vocational center. It really is a problem if they have school and we don't, because our kids miss that instruction. And if they don't have school when we do, we have the question of what do we do with the students for that time frame. Neither way is it really productive. The one thing that, and I'm not looking for a discussion tonight, but just to alert you to think about it, is you will note that we do not have school on January 20th. Our proposal shows that as a no-school day, as Civil Rights Day. This year, Plymouth Regional High School had school. Speaking with Mr. Halloran about that, he said they next year are also not not going to recognize with a day out of school, but rather they planned activities actually focusing student attention on civil rights issues. So we're actually very close.
What is August 30th? My birthday's the 18th.
Yeah, right.
August the 30th, how come?
I think that's just
Just
traditionally
the day.
it's a long weekend for
Friday
Labor Day
before
weekend.
Labor Day.
Never had that when I was in school, never heard of it.
You know why?
Well, you were in school.
'Cause it's where-
Well, that's right, we gotta go back to the good old days.
It's where it
I'll
falls.
tell you.
Oh, go
What
ahead.
is that? What
There's
is
some
it?
history there, okay?
What is it?
When we decided to start school before Labor Day, under the objections of some school board members, one of the things I said was that Friday before Labor Day is the second heaviest traffic day of the year, the first being the Friday before July 4th. That's a terrible day to have all the kids out there. The Thursday's pretty bad too, by the way, but, so that was a concession to going to starting school before Labor Day. At least we wouldn't have it that Friday, which is terrible on that east-west route that goes right through town. So you'll have to observe that this time it comes around. That's the history.
Huh? I never heard of it. Twice.
What's the history on starting it before Labor Day?
Well,
I
because
thought
of
it was a
Plymouth,
contract
mainly
that I
because
missed.
of Plymouth, mainly because of Plymouth. I objected because we have a lot of kids that work summer jobs, and Labor Day
Yeah.
weekend is one of the bigger weekends.
Well, just,
So it makes it a little inconvenient for some of the businesses and so forth to,
back to Lloyd's
It kind of
history,
interrupts that.
we never started before Labor Day.
no, we never.
And we finished late in
We never
June.
started before Labor Day, that's right, so it's a whole
So-
new thing.
So I was saying, was that a mistake?
Yeah, it's a mistake.
It's been that way every year I've been here.
Ruby has a
It's been that way. It's been this way this year, every year I've
No,
been
I
here.
missed it.
It's been a few years, yeah.
Do you have something from Ruby?
Ruby said, can you share my views on an August 22nd start date? Suggest instead that we start on Tuesday, August 27th, giving the kids a 3-day week followed by a 4-day week and then a 5-day week. Nice transition back. End of the year would then be Wednesday, June 18th instead of Friday, June 13th. It'd be 3 more days then.
Well, according to Mr. McCormick, we don't have to discuss this tonight, so what's done? It's
Right.
11:15.
Right.
And
Do
I don't know
detect
why
a
Plymouth
motion
is
to
starting so
adjourn?
early.
No.
Where were we at?
Well, you have to discuss it with Nate or Phil anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to highlight, bring it to you.
Yeah,
My
definitely
understanding was this is a process you folks have used.
Mm-hmm.
Present it one month, and then the next month you act on it.
Great. All right, so we'll take no action on the calendar. No action required this month. Okay, there's item 9H, which is a field trip.
Add that to the consent agenda.
Yeah, in your packet, there is a request for a field trip that you would need to act on because it is an overnight stay, and per your policy, this comes to you for action.
Why is there no transportation being billed?
There's only 2 kids, huh?
No, it's.
That would be,
Nothing. It
yeah, I think that's the case.
doesn't cost nothing. The
No
Radisson must be
transportation.
donating the rooms.
But they would have transportation down there, wouldn't they?
Probably
Back of the cars.
be on
Kathleen,
their,
one of the parents is what I'm getting, is Kathleen Guyot, who's a chaperone and also providing the transportation.
So she's donating it.
Okey dokey, add that to the consent agenda.
There
Okay.
being no objection to adding it to the consent agenda, we will do that.
And she will show proof of insurance before that to someone at the SAU office.
Oh,
I'm sure that's
yeah.
not a problem, but,
There's no reference to insurance on the trip.
right, usually it's school.
There's a policy about what kind of insurance they have to prove.
Yeah,
So we just make the approval subject to providing insurance, complying with insurance requirements.
right.
Well, then we shouldn't put that on the consent agenda. Subject to compliance with consent.
Did you say it should not be?
Correct.
Right, because it has a.
Because it has to
has
be
an added
modified.
Subject to compliance
to-
policy. Sorry, Paul. Okay, next item to discuss is item 9Z, which is other business. We have a Teacher of the Year notice. Dr. Phil, would you please present this information to the board?
Yes, I would like to, with a great deal of pride, hand out to you, I want to take one handed out, that we have a teacher in our district who has been nominated as the 2014 New Hampshire Teacher of the Year Award. Obviously, this is extremely prestigious. You can read about it. It is basically almost a year-long process from the time of nomination to moving forward. I'm trying, last year I had a teacher who was nominated, made it to one of the 4 finalists, I believe. It's tremendous recognition for the work that people do in our classrooms. So to have Jeanette Shedd recognized through this nomination is something we ought to be proud of.
And Jeanette teaches at the Danbury Elementary School.
That is correct.
Quite a record over there in Danbury.
But I didn't want this one to go unnoticed and wanted to bring it to your attention.
Yeah, it's kind of, although we haven't established any programs with results that promote pride and academic standing of students, this is certainly something to be proud of with respect to our staff. So I wish we could have stuck this in as a goal somewhere, but
Yeah. And as it proceeds, I'll certainly try to keep you up to date on where we are with it.
yeah, I think we should congratulate Jeanette Shedd as a matter of course. If you could relate that to her.
Certainly will.
I don't think there's any objection to doing that. Okay, moving on, we're at item 10, which is public comment.
Mr.
Any
Chairman?
public,
Could I-
did you have a question?
I did.
Yes.
We seem to have skipped item 8, which
Oh,
is reports, and I had a number of items in mind.
Yes, do you understand why we skipped item 8? Because they weren't on the agenda, but they are in your report. And given the lateness of the hour, how do we stand on timing, Dan, if we were to get these on the next agenda?
There are certain items which I have on my report, which I have no problem going to the next agenda, specifically item 9 on my report, no problem with it going to the next agenda. Item 4A on my report, no problem with it going to the next agenda. Items 4B and 4C, I would just consider those notification, if you will. I think they could be considered notification from the business administrator to the board of the business administrator acting on his responsibilities, and I'll just keep moving forward without a formal order by the board or a formal motion. However, if you feel differently about it, we can, because I'd like to proceed with those, at least one of those. But if you feel differently about it, you think it's worthy of a full agenda item and full discussion by the board, we'll wait.
What's your estimated cost of funding the insurance? If I remember that right. Isn't the actuarial?
Well, the cost is in the report.
No, that's the cost of the actuary.
Yeah.
But what's, Didn't you
there would be
kinda-
no additional cost. This is specifically, to be brief, this is the fact that you have to report what it has to do with. OPEB stands for the post-employment benefits, okay? And to get down to the nitty-gritty, what it is that due to RSA 100, we are required to offer health insurance to our retirees at their own expense. But because they're in the pool by which rates are developed, as they are for all public employers, okay, there's a concept there. And the concept is that the post-employment the retirees' health insurance, okay, because the retirees are in our pool and theoretically cost more to insure than the active employees because they're older, in theory, they cost more. Having them in the pool increases the rates of the active employees in some measure, in some incremental portion. And to comply with GASB 45, you have to disclose what that number is.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned, I think, in past board reports that according to the people at LGC that I've spoken with about this, we have the lowest of any district they insure factor. Okay, and they estimated what that number was to me, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But to comply with GASB and get this one significant finding off our audit, we need to have an actuary calculate what that cost is. It's not a cost we're going to incur in terms of a line item expense. It's just, for the most part, it's a disclosure that because we comply with the law and our retirees are in our pool, even though they're paying for their own insurance, having them in the pool drives up the rate for our active employees by some value.
Do we have to do that annually?
You have to update it annually. So that's why I say in my report that the first report is going to be the most expensive, the $2,950, and then subsequent years will be substantially cheaper.
So there's no reason why I can't go on the consent agenda.
It's not in a motion. I guess the point I was getting at, we could ignore it, and it always show up in the
Yep,
audit.
you can.
And if it's there, with LGC's estimate is so low, it's maybe as much as it's gonna cost us to do the actuary.
No, it's not. It's much more than that.
It is much more.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But
okay.
ignoring it and just having the finding on your audit report is one option that doesn't violate any laws or anything like that. It's just a matter of how clean you want your audit to be.
And it saves the $2,950 to calculate a number that no one will ever ask for.
Yeah.
It's, still, if it's very low, it would be good to have that number, in case it comes up. I think that Dan probably likes to have a clean audit.
My personal
Which is a
audit
good
is
quality.
spectacular.
Yes.
As far as the district's audit, it is your district to choose and do with as you wish.
Well then,
I'm inclined to want to defer these,
How about item C, not 4C?
and you want to get rid of the chemicals.
And I don't see that as something that I would typically, I was more giving you this as a way of disclosure, and so if you had dramatic concerns, you'd bring them up and I'd stop, but this is, I consider this is part of my responsibility to the district in terms of facility safety, et cetera.
The state has turned in times at the Bristol dump.
They won't accept these hazardous materials.
They won't accept those.
We already talked to Bristol about these. And we talked to Plymouth State because a number of years ago, Plymouth State came in and cleaned out the science labs as well.
Okay. I just knew that they had hazardous turn-in times.
That's hazardous household chemicals. It's household. These are not household chemicals.
These aren't.
I would suggest and support Dan's position that this is an administrative task that needs to be done. Quite frankly, I don't believe it needs board approval. I think you ought to receive this just as notification of something that we're doing to maintain school safety.
Is there a way to, if we're disposing of these chemicals, is it because we no longer need them, or they're expired, or can we no longer buy them so we don't have to pay to dispose of them?
I would say it's a combination of the first two items you mentioned. They're expired and we no longer use them.
Okay, so we won't be buying them
Correct.
again to have to pay to dispose of them. Okay. All right, the rest of the stuff on here that you would like to put before us as agenda items, can we defer?
Sure.
Okay, given the lateness of the hour.
Uh-huh.
So we're now at public comment. Is there any public comment?
Yes, Fred Robinson from Danbury. With Phil working on the calendar for next year, I'd just like, from staff's point of view, a point of clarification on the days that have been set aside for staff professional development. Now, is that staff professional development strictly for faculty, or is it also for support staff? Because so far, we've had 3 days with staff development where the support staff was given no program during those days, basically given the day off unpaid. So just what the clarification is on that as far as the staff development.
Well, no, you know more about it, go ahead.
Well, from my perspective, that's because of the fact that the faculty is contracted for 186 days, and the staff is contracted for 183, including 3 holidays. So that's why there's a different amount of, it's not a day off unpaid, it's one of the days of the year that's not part of the 183 that the support staff is contracted for.
So when is the support staff then supposed to get professional development?
At this point, there's not I think there was also a board resolution in the last 12 months that on those days, on the afternoons that PD happens, or on the half days, the professionally support staff is paid their full daily wage and can participate in those professional development activities that happen on the half days.
I haven't actually experienced any of the half days yet, so, yeah, it's not because I didn't choose to attend, I just don't recall that we even had them, so. We do require professional development for our certification. And last year, the budget amount of money set aside for professional development for the support staff was cut in half during the big budget cut that took place last year. So there is also the possibility that people could apply to go to workshops and the funding not be there for them. So, it's just a concern of the support staff, is how do we get our professional development at this point? And I know part of it has to do with Judy and with the passing of Marie. These are items that were handled by them as far as setting up professional development for the support staff. So just.
So can we take that under advisement? And,
Oh, sure,
you know,
and I had my hand before, in looking at the remaining half-days, as Mr. Rosner speaks to, one of the things that all staff will be receive instruction in relates to bullying, and I don't remember if that was the March. I think there's one March, May, and June.
Yeah, I guess it's probably required.
That's required. So that's just one, but certainly we'll take under consideration what you're saying.
And also, will there be like full school training as to the things that may have taken place with the incident? It'd be where we had the state police come in and evaluate the emergency procedures and things.
I would expect that would be contingent upon what law enforcement tells us.
Yeah.
That could be an option.
Because it would be nice for the staff to know what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
There, just so you're aware, that there are full advanced emergency plans that have been worked on for the last 6 months by each building that are going to be completed in the next 30 days. That'll be deployed to each building.
Okay. I guess that was probably several. All right, thank you.
All right, and you'll take Mr. Robinson's concern
Yeah.
under advisement. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're now, no other public comment, we'll
Oh,
move on.
could I make a comment for Ruby?
For,
It should have been under reports, I think, because it involves the high school.
okay,
It's just a piece of information. She wanted to say that a Kearsarge teacher visited the high school last week as part of the I-3 grant. I think I said that right.
Yep.
He said he was impressed with how calm the school was. He said it was a really, really good environment. So,
The only other thing for reports, the district treasurer apologized for not getting in time for your packets, but this is her report of receipts that you receive monthly. This is her report for the period ending January 31st. So copies for each one of you.
Any typos? All right, we're now at the consent agenda. Is there any objection or changes to the consent agenda as agreed prior? Hearing none, the items on the consent agenda are, could you read them off to us, Dan?
Item 9C, the resignation. Item 9D, newfound nutrition credit card payment availability. Item 9E, the Marie Ross Memorial Scholarship. Item 9F, surplus.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass the consent agenda
So
as
moved.
proposed?
Second.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Lloyd. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0-0 with 2 excused absences. We are now moving on to item 12, which will be, let's see, recap. There's no action necessary. Personnel was consent. Nutrition was consent.
field trip, did you get that?
Yeah, I'm getting
Oh,
to it.
yep.
Marie Memorial Scholarship was consent. Surplus was consent. Groton and Danbury. I'm doing multiple things here to try to move this along, keep my sanity. Danbury Citizens Petition to implement a K through 6 configuration at the Danbury Elementary School.
Tabled.
Under discussion, we had suggested we were gonna have a motion to table.
So moved.
So the action is motion to table by Dawn. And the motion to table is pending outcome of the K through 8 report, right, Dawn?
Yeah.
Did you get that, Leah?
Pending outcome.
K through 8 study
K
committee.
through 8
Study committee report.
report. And who seconded the motion, please?
I'll second.
Paul? Okay, motion's been made to table pending outcome of the K through 8 report. Been seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions? Motion passes 5-0-0 with 2 excused absences. We're now at the item 12, whichever it is, G, I guess. Gotta renumber these. School calendar, no action is currently necessary, is that correct?
Yes.
No objection? Okay, we now have field trip. The concern here was that would this be amended to include approval subject to compliance with insurance policy? Who makes that motion?
So moved.
Okay, the motion for the field trip is to approve subject to compliance with district insurance policy. Made by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sue. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0-0, 2 excused. Let's see, we're now at other business, and the other business had to do with Jeanette Shedd. S-H-E-D-D, right? Jeanette Shedd to be congratulated for her nomination as Teacher of the Year. And Dr. McCormick is going to take care of that on behalf of the board, right?
Yes, I'd be very happy to write her a letter on your behalf.
Congratulated by Dr. McCormick.
Alrighty, I make a motion we adjourn.
Is there a motion to approve the congratulations?
So moved.
Okay, by Sue,
Yes.
seconded by Lloyd. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, 2 excused absences. Okay, we're now at item 13, manifests. Are there
Not
any
at
manifests?
this time.
Not at this time. Okay, no manifests.
We have no, I think we need a second signature on it.
Okay. Footnote, there's a second signature required. Under announcements, we have listed 14A, which is the second session balloting. Voting by ballot occurs on Tuesday, March 12th, 2013. Those interested in voting should be encouraged to attend at their local town polling place. School events are listed, and they're item 15 on the agenda here, and we note that the next board meetings are now for February 25th and for March 4th. Non-public on March 4th. February 25th is also a non-public regarding superintendent selection.
Mr. Migliori?
Yes.
If I could, for the March 11th meeting, I had at your place setting a pamphlet on the CADI,
Oh, yes.
the TAPS report, the substance abuse report, at-risk behaviors. There will be a presentation at the March 11th meeting. Please bring that with you, but gave it to you in advance so you could have an opportunity to look it over and ask any questions if you so chose to do so.
Thank you. That presentation will last about a half an hour. It's going to go after the Wellness Committee Council presentation. The Wellness Council has asked to get on our agenda to update their policy, and that's scheduled for March 11th. They're going to present what they do and what's important about it. Is there a motion to adjourn? It is now 11:43 p.m. and Paul made the motion to adjourn. No surprise there, and no surprise either is the second by Lloyd. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is